Oh, g'day. I'm going to take you through the biscuit cutter today, but first we need to mark out our material for the sides and the top and underside of our carcass section for our side table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start marking out down this end, and I'm going to put some marks on my timber to mark out for a side piece, a long piece that might be at the top, a short side piece again, and another long piece. And the reason we do that is because we want the material to wrap around so all the grain matches up together. Okay, so let's get started with that. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm marking out about 185 millimeters, 505 millimeters, 185 and 505 again. And that's using the measurements that's on the plan. Notice that I'm just going a fraction over what's on the plan. All right, so hopefully you should be able to have your material being marked out looking something like this. All right, so remember, those are the sections of the material that we are going to be cutting eventually. What we need to do is we need to mark out the position for our biscuits to go in, okay? Now we probably only need one biscuit for the short pieces, and we probably need 2 biscuits for the long sections. So it doesn't really matter where they go, but they obviously want to be sort of roughly in the middle if you've only got the one, and split into sort of the 2/3 positions if you've got the 2 biscuits. So I'm going to go and do that now. All right, hopefully when you do this, your material will look a little bit something like this. Notice that I've made my marks going across the join of the material, okay? That's going to be really important to make sure that my material can keep lining up where they should be when we go to widen them together. All right, another good tip is to mark out your pieces. Once you've decided which order they're going in, mark them out from the top with, say, an A, B, C. That way, when they get jumbled up, you know that's how they go back together in that orientation. I've made them this way. The skinny one is going to be always in the center, but the skinny one is got a slight bow in it that way, and these outside pieces have got a slight bow in them that way. So hopefully, when I widen them together, all of those little kinks get ironed out. Another good tip is when you look at the growth rings on the end grain of the material, ideally, if you're widening together a whole bunch of pieces, you want to alternate them. So the growth rings go down like that, like a frown face, and then up like that, like a smiley face, and so on. That way, any future cupping that happens should hopefully sort of get ironed out, and you end up with nice flat board. Okay, so our biscuit cutter. Now, a biscuit joiner as a machine, or a biscuit cutter, is a little bit like an angle grinder. Okay, it's a cutting machine, and it's a machine that ends up cutting a little groove in the edge of the material, which we can then slot these guys called biscuits into. Now, the way they're designed to work is when the glue, these are a compressed wood fiber material. When the glue soaks into these biscuits, they swell up and jam themselves into the groove that our biscuit cutter has cut. So what we're going to do is put my safety glasses on, going to put my earmuffs on. We're going to line up the center of the biscuit cutter with the mark that we've made, turn the machine on and get all of these cut. Please make sure that you don't go and put cuts on the lines that you drew to separate the different pieces, because that's where we're going to cut, and we really don't want to cut through our biscuits. Good job, sir. You might have noticed that I've used a couple of bench hooks to secure my material in place. The material's loose, but if I'm pushing against these bench hooks, then it can't go anywhere. So you need to make sure your material is secure when you're using the biscuit cutter. You can clamp it into the vise and things like that, but this is a nice, easy solution. I'm going to go ahead and do the cuts for my other two pieces now. I've gone and laid out my timber in these long clamps. These are called Compressex clamps, which are designed to pull in across the width of the material that we're gluing together, but also squeeze down and up on them to try to keep them as flat as possible. I'm using these scrap bits of timber as packers just to make sure the edges of my material don't get bruised. It's always a good idea before you do any gluing to do a bit of a dry run first. So I'm going to go and put all of these biscuits in my slots without any glue and make sure it's going to go together nicely. Okay, I've just checked out to make sure that my material is going to go together nicely in a dry run, and I'm confident that it's going to. So what I'm going to do now is use some PVA glue to run along my edges, put in all of the slots that I've created, then I'm going to go and put my biscuits in, and I can start squeezing it together afterwards. This will take a couple of minutes. It's always a good idea to run your finger along the edge of the material to make sure that you've got a good covering of material over the whole surface. Okay, I'm going to go and do that along the whole edge, and I might need to add a little bit of glue. Clean your finger up as you go along. Just kidding, don't eat the glue, kids. Two more surfaces to do. Gluing up is certainly not one of the most fun jobs going around, but it's such an important thing to do well. If you don't do it well, what you're going to find is that your joints are going to open up in no time, and you're going to start to see these cracks appear all over your beautiful new work. We don't want that to happen. I've gone and put some glue on there now, and now we can start putting it together in the clamps to glue it up. Now don't be surprised if they take a little bit of encouragement to get together. Those slots in theory should be all perfectly lined up, but remember, some of our pieces had a little bit of bow in the material, so I've got a mallet here just in case I need to encourage it a little bit further. Alright, primarily, the most important thing before you start clamping them up nice and tight is to make sure that the marks you've made originally, where you put your biscuit joins, your biscuits in place, make sure those marks are all lined up. If they're not lined up, you're going to find that you might run short a little bit when you go to cut your material, or your biscuits don't quite end up how they should. Alright, when you've tightened it up, you're going to find that through your joints you've squeezed out a lot of the glue. That's okay, you're sort of meant to. If you don't, that might be an indication that you didn't put enough glue on, which is a little bit of a concern. You do need to be careful that you don't over tighten them and squeeze all of the glue out. Now, I would strongly recommend that you get some wet paper towel, damp paper towel, and give your work a good wipe over, because that's going to save you some time later. You can stand your work up and do the same on the underside as well. Alright, now that job's done, all that's left to do is sit back and wait for it to dry. And in the next video, I'll take you through the next process, running this through the thicknesser and then cutting it down on the table saw using, so that we can create our top and bottom and side pieces. Catch you later.